Episode 9 of Apple TV Plus Servant Season 2 is titled Goose. As they wait for Jericho's return, Dorothy and Sean pretend everything is fine at a tense Christmas Eve lunch. Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot back again with my weekly recap, breakdown, and review of the latest episode of Apple TV Plus Servant Season 2, Episode 9, which was titled Goose, and we only have one episode left, and we'll talk about it in this review, but I feel like this 9th episode was a little underwhelming. We're going to break it all down in this spoiler discussion, but before we dive into it, as you can see on the screen now, make sure you're following me on all my other social media accounts, which you can find those links in the description below. If you are new to the channel, welcome to the community. Consider subscribing to the channel, and while you all are at it, make sure you hit the notification bell. That way you can get the alert for when I drop new content. It will mean a lot to me if you all can like and share this review. It helps out the channel a lot, but I also appreciate all the support. And in the comments below, again, let's discuss this episode. I love discussing it. I'll read the theories, the comments, the predictions. They're so much fun. So let me know where you all are at with this nice 9th episode. Did it set up the finale for you all? Are you excited for the finale? Are you a little bit underwhelmed by this episode? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Are you kind of in between? Let's discuss it all in the comments below. So let's jump into it, man. Just my initial thoughts of this 9th episode titled Goose. I felt like it was just kind of a episode that had some moments here and there, you know, seeing the Julian and Leanne aftermath of last week's episode, or them, you know, hooking up. Seeing, you know, Natalie's name on Julian's caller ID, hearing her voice for the first time since, like, what, episode 1 or 2 of this season. We get the lady in the black at the end of the episode. There's a little bit of underlying religious tones with the title of this episode. So there are the little moments, little Easter eggs that I enjoy. But as an episode, the comedic relief with the Courtney character and the dad being in the mix, and just the lack of answers being given to us just kind of made me a little standoffish with this episode. But again, we'll get into it as we break it down. But again, just let me know off top, how did you all feel about this nice episode? Did you love it? Did you, I don't want to say hate, because hate's a strong word. Did you not enjoy the episode? Were you slightly disappointed, or were you kind of just indifferent with this episode? Let's start it in the comments and have a discussion about it all. So recapping the episode, you know, this episode was titled Goose, which I kind of looked up, you know, what's the significance of this title, right? As I always do. And the only thing I was able to kind of find in regards to Goose, and, you know, we know the show has a lot of religious undertones, but apparently Goose is in regards to a spiritual meaning, can mean transformation, which is a little bit of that maybe going on with Julian in this episode. He's becoming, as we know, he's not a believer, but maybe he's a believer after him dying and coming back to life due to the help of his hookup, Leanne, which we'll talk about. But also it's a little bit of religious undertone in regards to, in the Bible, you know, comparing gooses to doves, it can symbolize the Holy Spirit. So there are some connective tissues of regarding what we can look forward to in a finale in regards to transformation, in regards to the Holy Spirit, in regards to this lady in black that appears in this episode. So again, there's things to look forward to, but overall this episode was a little bit on the so for me personally. But as I digress, as we open up the episode, we see Sean preparing dinner for this. I already knew it was going to be a very awkward Turner Christmas Eve lunch. We see him plucking the feathers off of the goose, and we kind of have this really, I'll say this, wasn't the biggest fan of the narrative and the pacing of the episode, but the look of this episode, from the costuming, from the set design, to just opening shots as we see this, you know, the feather going through the house, the goose's feather, it makes its way up to the upstairs as Leanne sweeps it up, or I should say Dorothy sweeps it up with the vacuum as she's preparing to be reunited with Jericho, which she might have that wish coming true unless the woman in black has something to say about that. We see Dorothy learns that Leanne has told her that George has left. Now, the thing that I really didn't necessarily like about this episode was in regards to, logically speaking, we saw George get hit by a car in New York, and this really seems like a predominant neighborhood, right? No one called the police. It couldn't even be a hit or run, because I'm sure someone would have called the police, would have saw this man was hit by a car. Like, I don't like how the show is kind of, I hope they're not sweeping that under the rug, that he was hit by a car and we're assuming he's maybe alive and maybe he walked away. I'll give the show that. Again, we have one more episode to go, but maybe he got hit by the car. He was brought back to life by his own doing. Leanne maybe brought him back. Aunt May, the woman in black, who knows? But maybe he got up and went back to his cult. or maybe I don't know what the show, hopefully they give us an explanation of what exactly happened to Uncle George, because no one knows in the show. Leanne just says he's gone, he left, and that's, everyone's just like, oh, okay, and no one appeared to call the cops, especially the person that hit Uncle George with their car. Let me know your thoughts on that. But either way, we learn that Dorothy's dad is going to be coming to celebrate this Christmas Eve lunch with his new girlfriend, Courtney, who we'll talk about here as she's preparing for the perfect Christmas luncheon. It's been a while since we've seen, and this was another moment that I kind of missed this season, because I really love when Sean's cooking food. We see him have his, moments of cooking, which looks beautiful and terrifying at the same time, if you kind of know what I mean, as he's kind of taking out the guts of the goose and all that. But again, the cinematography was just fantastic as he's preparing for dinner, and also the Turners are preparing for Jericho's first Christmas, as they think they're going to get him back in this episode. We see Julian kind of filling in his dad in regards to everything that's been going on since the last time we saw the dad, which I believe was in last year's season finale. We're introduced to Courtney, who's, again, the comic relief in this episode was just kind of the more weaker elements of this particular episode. I love when the show throws in comedy, but sometimes it just doesn't fit the tonal atmosphere and kind of the story that's being told. So the Courtney, she really didn't work for me this episode, but nonetheless, we get this awkward moment of Courtney being a fan of Dorothy, who's just like, as she's fanning out against her being, a news reporter. We see Leanne coming down the stairs, and her and Julian kind of lock eyes. So again, I was prepared to get a very awkward lunch. Cut to Leanne telling Sean that George isn't coming back, Sean, and even if he did, he doesn't break the rules. As Sean asks her, what exactly are the rules, Leanne? Again, as the perfect servant thing does, they never answer the questions it's asked within the scenes. But nonetheless, Dorothy believes that she will be seeing Jericho, and Leanne even says what happens if she doesn't see Jericho, which we'll talk about that here in a bit. Cut to Dorothy looking outside, expecting Uncle George, which he never does show up in this episode. We get this very interesting prayer by Sean talking about they don't necessarily deserve the things they have, but they are wanting to get the things back that they lost, which obviously was alluding to, Jericho. As I brought up several times in a lot of my reviews, what's going on with Natalie? Is she dead? Is she missing? Is she just kind of on a sabbatical with Julian? We see that she's continuously calling Julian, as Leanne points out. Julian, your phone's blowing up, which I thought was a funny. That was one of the more subtle, funny moments of the episode. We see Dorothy runs outside, believing that Jericho is going to arrive. We see Julian, which again, this part of the episode was just kind of, it makes sense in a certain context, right? In regards to when we see Leanne and Julian talking in the kitchen, and she's very kind of coming off to Julian, as we see in this scene here. She tells him that she's feeling more powerful. She's feeling more good. She's feeling good about herself. And she tells, Julian's like, we made a mistake. I should have never slept with you. And she doesn't believe that, as Leanne offers to take his pain away. And she says, I'm doing what I want. So that's a very important line between those two characters, because as we see Julian in this episode, as I kind of thought it was a little bit overblown of him going to the bathroom. Speaking of blown, going to the bathroom and take a bit of a bump break, as we know. It's interesting that happened, because was that Leanne relieving his pain in a sense, kind of twisting his mind to kind of do these drugs and potentially take his own life? I don't know if that was her doing or just happened to be a coincidence, because we know what actually ends up happening later on. But again, more of the comic relief. We're seeing Julian cut between these different scenes of him taking the drugs in the bathroom, them playing the guessing game with his dad and his dad's girlfriend. We see them playing Jenga, and then we get the correlation of the pieces falling down, and we see Julian falling down in correlation to that scene. So kind of subtle way of saying Julian is slowly but surely losing himself. He's breaking down. He hasn't been sleeping. He hasn't been, returning the calls of Natalie, as we see him playing this voicemail that she left in regards to she feels like he's boxing her out. And again, we ultimately see him falling out in the bathroom, essentially overdosing on drugs, which again, going back to Leanne saying, I want to take your pain away. Was that her doing, or was it just a coincidence that he he went to the bathroom too many times, let's just say that. But cut to the most eventful part of the episode for me. The last 5 minutes were the best parts of the episode. We see Julian's passed out. The dad doesn't know what to do, tells Sean to call the paramedics, but we see Leanne, or Dorothy, number one, she sees her brother's dying in front of her, which, if he would have died, the loss of her son, the loss of Julian, as we see in the episode, what was created in the basement, that was just only seconds away if that would have happened. But we see Leanne walk up to him, to take his pain away, but she brings him back to life. She hits him on the chest, she breathes in his mouth, and he is now risen again. As we know, Julian, or as we know, Leanne can bring back people from the dead. As Julian is awoken from the dead, he said, I saw him and he seemed to be okay. As Servant likes to do, the dad asks Julian, who are you talking about, right? And of course, he doesn't answer. I am assuming he's talking about Jericho. Now, Julian died. I am to assume Julian died, and wherever he went in that moment of death, he saw Jericho somewhere. Lesser saints, heaven, and purgatory, or wherever in between life and death. I don't know where Julian went, but he saw Jericho. I am assuming that's who he saw in that moment. Let me know what you guys, how you interpreted that scene. As we wake up, and almost had a seizure myself as the ambulance lights was going on and off, we wrap up the Perfect Turner's luncheon. It's officially over, but as the episode kind of finales, we see Leanne makes her way to the basement. She sees Jericho's kind of his clothing and his kind of his sheets as is being made for someone to hang themselves, as we find out that was Dorothy's contingency plan. As Leanne asks her, you're willing to die for Jericho? And she says, of course, I'm his mother. Which in that moment, if you look at the eyes of Leanne, she almost kind of realizes maybe she isn't as bad as I thought that she was, even though she, was responsible for the death of her son. So maybe there's a little bit of hope. As I alluded to, the episode being titled Goose, transformation, the Holy Spirit. Maybe there's a transformation in Leanne in the way she looks at Dorothy, that she's willing to take her own life to get her son, or to not be able to see her son again. It means that she doesn't want to live anymore. So we'll see how Leanne may or may not help her in next week's finale. As we wrap up the episode, Sean screaming for Dorothy's name. We get a knock at the door. It's a woman covered in black, which I assume this is the same woman that Uncle George was referring to last week, that she's coming. Wasn't referring to Aunt May. She's referring to whoever this woman is. She doesn't take off her setup. I couldn't recognize her face. It didn't look like a character we've seen before. It didn't look like an older version of, as I mentioned many weeks ago, that I think that we will be seeing the return of Leanne's mother from the dead herself, but I couldn't make out who the woman was. So let me know if this is someone we've seen before, or if this is a brand new character, this woman in black that tells Sean that I understand that you are looking for Jericho. End of episode. Who is this woman in black? Is she, Uncle George like, that she wants to help the Turner? Is she someone that's going to correct what Uncle George wasn't able to do last week, which was kill Leanne after disobeying the Lesser Saints and their traditions, or not traditions, but going off of their beliefs? Is she someone to help? Is she someone to harm? Let me know your thoughts there. Again, is Uncle George dead? Is he going to come back? Is Aunt May going to make an appearance? Will we be seeing Jericho make an appearance? What's going on with Leanne and Julian, their relationship? Julian, him dying, and did he see Jericho wherever he was left in between life and death? Again, wasn't a fan of the pacing. Wasn't a fan of the comedic relief, the comic relief with Courtney in this episode. But they planted the seeds for hopefully a satisfying conclusion for this season. We know we got a season 3 and potentially a season 4, but I just want this to have a good wrap up to the story being told in regards to pieces from episode or season 1 leading into season 2, and of course leaving some breadcrumbs for a season 3. But let me know your pros, your cons, your thoughts, your theories of this episode, and what you all will hope to see in next week's finale. As always, make sure to like the video, share the video, leave your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit the bell. That way you don't miss any of my other content. Hope you all enjoyed this review. Hope you're staying safe, and we'll see you in the next video.